we're on the let's see here. There. Gone down through most of the paragraphs here, talking about the things that impacted on the world scene in the time, in the late 1700s to create the scenario, the chessboard, you might say, that Thomas kind of likened it to. It's like a chessboard with all the players, just pawns and kings and queens and knights and everything all lining up, so as to create this scenario whereby the events that impacted the French, the France in the time of the Revolution actually spread throughout Europe. And that was really the first vial, was the spreading of that unrest and the spirit of democracy throughout Europe. We're studying really a lot about what happened right in France, but that's not really what the first vial was about. That was just what created got everything lined up for the spreading of that to go outside the borders of France. Just while we're waiting here, we can maybe just go to the Bible marking on this, which kind of gives us a really brief overview of what you're taking, and the great voice, as we understood it there, was the analogous, he says here, to the demands of revolutionaries resulting in the French Revolution. It was followed by a great voice issued jointly from nations confederated against the French Revolution in 1790 and protested the treatment of Louis XVI and the French nobility. And so the foreign armies massed on the French borders, forcing the revolutionaries against their enemies. The war forced on France brought forth Napoleon. His military genius resulted in outstanding victories throughout Europe and brought for him elevation to the highest position in France. It provides details of the third wolf referred to in Revelations 11 verses 15 and 18. So that was kind of the great voice. And the vials are really what the decisive events of history. And it's the wrath of God says that these things are under the supervision and guidance of angelic administration. That's why it's going out to the 7 angels, or the agencies that are working out these things. And of course, angels can be a mortal agency as well, as it was in this case of Napoleon. It doesn't always have to be immortal agencies. So one of the angels here was Napoleon. In fact, the first 5 of them. They poured out his vial upon the earth. Hi, Beatrice. Good to see you. Yeah. Where are you?
I'm just kind of stepping back again and looking at the whole picture. It seems like the system that was in place with the monarchies and church being so oppressive, it was just simply too restricted for the gospel to prosper or to be spread beyond certain borders. Kind of God, in His wisdom, saw the need for a huge earthquake to upset this system of man that wasn't working, it wasn't producing.
Yeah, pot needed stirring.
Yeah, get things going, opened up.
Yeah.
Did it actually kill the monarchy at this time?
Yeah,
we're coming to that?
We're coming to that, yeah.
It was when he tried to escape, but they decided to behead him. I think it was his head.
Morning.
Morning.
Hello. Chris out there this morning.
Somebody's bright though.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any difference.
That's it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting when you know, looking back on these things, you can see how the divine hand was in there, not maybe openly manifest at the time, but looking back on it, you can certainly see the workings of it, and it's a good lesson to us how these things work, and you know, as much as it may be difficult in our time to see exactly how it's working, we know it is working. It's in there, and whatever is going on out there is it's all for a reason and for a purpose. That will become more manifest as years go on. We get a chance to look back on it. Gordon?
Well, I was just thinking, like we've seen in our day, where long-established dynasties, you might say, are falling to this the lure of the democracy.
Yeah.
You know, like in now the Arab Spring, they call it. I mean, those are entrenched so deeply, those hierarchies and everything, and the only one that really hasn't fallen yet is Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and they're uneasy.
Yeah.
They are uneasy.
But there's tremendous power in that,
yeah,
in giving people a sense of power. And I don't know, even those, I don't know what you call them, far right, like the fundamentalist groups that want to take power. See, even in Africa, what's happening now, they're fighting back against that.
yeah.
But like it's kind of gone from
Pendulum
extreme to
swings.
the other.
Yeah, pendulum swings, and one way or another. You know, the regimes that are still in place, like Saudi Arabia, and that I think are tending not, you know, they're tending to try not to be too oppressive and stop that from happening.
Pretty relaxed as a monarchy goes.
Yeah. So anyway, where we are at here is the first went and poured out his vial. This is verse 2 of chapter 16. Poured out his vial upon the earth. The reference really is to the Roman earth, or the territory of the empire. Fulfillment is limited to the borders of Europe in this case, in the first vial, and most of the other five. Napoleon's divine commission, of which he was ignorant at the time, however, was in place, and it was against the Roman Catholic countries. And when it says it fell, it means it broke out. It was noisome or evil, like a malignant ulcer, an open running sore resulting from local inflammation or constitutional irritation. The French Revolution was limited to France, but affecting all of Europe. And it affects the whole body, like a canker or a sore. It affects the whole body. It just, you feel it through your whole body, and that's what happened here. It was felt way beyond the borders of France, and it in fact continues to be felt to the present day. The immediate effect, which was accomplished in the first 5 vials, was to end the Holy Roman Empire after a millennium of rule. So that's kind of what, just thought I would just recapitulate that from the Bible marking portion of that. So we are on paragraph 17. 11?
Yeah, you started.
11? Yeah, I think that's probably more like it. Yeah, we ended up where the Jacobins had, in paragraph 10, had risen, and their power and influence had surged. And so paragraph 11 speaks a little bit more to that, about them asserting their power, but still at this point the authority of the king is still sufficiently in place that they fail to subdue it. At this particular time, it says, from the assembly, their numbers having increased to 30,000, they marched to the king's palace. As they were demolishing the doors with axes, Louis XVI ordered them to be opened. The stormy wave rushed in and demanded his sanction to certain decrees that he had vetoed and the appointment of new ministers, but he refused their petitions, and for this time they were persuaded to retire. So they asserted their power against the king. They had been tolerant of him. They had been willing to have the monarchy continue in a subdued degree, kind of a democratic monarchy. But once he had attempted to escape, then they didn't want anything more to do with it. So they had rushed in here and demanded the sanction to certain decrees and the appointment of new ministers. So even what they were demanding at this time wasn't his abolition of the monarchy, but they were at this point in a just having a portion of the power that they eventually obtained. Gordon?
Sort of shades of Idle No More.
Yeah.
You can see the same sort of thing possibly happening, although, of course, our leaders today recognize that they don't have absolute authority and they give way, and therefore maybe buy some time.
Right. I think where we're at here is about 1792. Let's go with the timeline on that so we get it. In June the 20th of 1791 is where he attempted to flee France, and I think it's down in the Declaration of Pillnitz was on August 27th. The rulers of Austria and Prussia agreed to combine their forces, and the Jacobins, I think their influence began to would have been right in this period of August here somewhere, in July, August 1792, something like that. Okay, there we got the date, July 25th, 1792. So that was just soon after the storming of the palace. It says, soon after this, the Assembly proclaimed that the country was in danger. The indispensable measures of defense it decreed carried to its height the excitation of a revolutionary frenzy. On July 25, 1792, the Duke of Brunswick put the army of Europe in motion for the invasion of France, the suppression of the revolution, and the punishment of the Republicans. The Duke of Brunswick is from outside the borders of France, and I believe Prussia, and they put their army in motion to invade France. He published a great voice or manifesto in the name of the Emperor of Germany and King of Prussia, Russia, and England, though they secretly approved the attacks of the European coalition, had not yet cooperated in them. That is, England. They had secretly approved the attacks, but had not yet cooperated in them. The Duke reproached those who had usurped the reins of administration in France with having troubled its good order and overthrown its legitimate government. which they deemed to be the monarchy. He declared that the Allied sovereigns had taken up arms in order to put an end to anarchy in France, to arrest the attacks upon the altar and the throne, to render to the king the security and the liberty of which he had been deprived, and to put him in a situation for exercising his legitimate authority. In consequence, he declared the National Guards and authorities responsible for all these disorders until the arrival of the troops of the coalition. He summoned them to return to their ancient fidelity. He said that the inhabitants of the towns which ventured to defend themselves should be punished immediately as rebels, according to the rigor of war, and their houses demolished or burnt. And that if the city of Paris did not restore the king to his full liberty, or refused to render him the respect due to him, the Allied princes rendered personally responsible for such failure on their heads, to be judged by military law without hope of pardon, all the members of the National Legislative Assembly, of the department, of the district, of the municipality, and of the National Guard, and that if the palace were forced or insulted, the Allied potentates would take up an exemplary and memorable vengeance by giving up Paris to plunder and to total destruction. He promised, that is this Duke of Brunswick, he promised on the contrary that he would engage to employ the good offices of the Confederate princes Louis XVI in favor of the inhabitants of Paris, and obtain for them the pardon of their errors and offences if they promptly obeyed the orders of the coalition. So this was the confrontation between France and the powers outside of France were coming to a head here. So, in summary, although the Jacobins initially did not get their way with the king, Louis XVI realized that the monarchy was in serious trouble, called for assistance from beyond the borders of France, and as a result, the ultimatum was issued to the Legislative Assembly from the Holy Roman Emperor, or his spokesman, the Duke of Brunswick. That all as clear as mud.
And the ultimatum was?
The ultimatum was that they either give in to and restore Louis XVI, or all these things would happen to them. The failure would be on their heads, and they would be judged on military law without hope of pardon, and so on. If they did comply with his ultimatum and restore Louis XVI, then they would act in favor of the inhabitants of Paris and obtain for them the pardon of their errors and offences if they promptly obeyed the orders of the coalition. So they're just saying if they didn't obey what they were saying, they would come in there and restore order, restore the king, and punish all those responsible for, for the state of affairs that France was in at this time.
Wasn't this the time that when kings ruled by divine right, as they called it?
Yeah, well that's...
And it was a terrible thing to say anything against the monarch.
You remember the little article we read out last week about the feudal system, which was that was the root and ground of it. The kings ruled by divine right, and they had all the land, and the Pope was like one of those kings. And they for their papal system, they had all the land in the Holy Roman Empire, and it trickled on down from there to the common people of the land really had nothing but to work and obey. Without really any hope of ever obtaining anything better. Gordon?
Was the church actually a little bit above wasn't the church kind of dictating to the kings?
There were times when the church did, like I think we read again in that article on King John, had wanted to take some or appoint some official that the Pope didn't agree with, that they forced him to comply.
was the same with really with Henry VIII. I mean, he had to start his own church because he Pope was saying to him, no, you can't remarry or whatever it was, divorce or whatever. And so he said, well, I'll fix you up. But that was the kind of control they had over the system.
Sid?
Yeah, really, and I mean, it's very similar in a more covert fashion today, and that the politicians get their power from the church, and the church gets their power from the politicians. They kind of, each one realizes that they have to play ball with the other one in order to have the kind of power that they want.
Right, and the church gets its power from the people too, and and there were times, especially even in the time of the French Revolution, people were very upset with the church, but there were pockets of very strong adherence to the church, and they went to war and gave their lives for in fighting against that, like the Vendée and different areas. The church had a lot of power in the people, and that trickled up the line, and sometimes the people were more loyal to the church than they were to the king, and that would sometimes then assert the power of the church. So
maybe that's something a little more applicable to our times, where now there's so much more secularism. The church doesn't hold quite the same power in people's hearts. In some people's, again, like you say, pockets of them are fiercely dependent on the church. Pockets of them are fiercely independent of the church. However, that they fall onto the hooks of the political system. So between them both, they can control the greater number of the population.
right.
My dad said in his day the chain was still there, that the Bible had been changed, so they didn't have much freedom of religion even.
That's a good point. Most of the people didn't have access to the Bible.
No.
It was starting to filter through. That was starting to change in the time of the French Revolution. That was that had a lot of impact on the people too. Having access to the Bible kind of spoiled the influence of the church a little bit. But up to that time, they had to go to the church, to the church leaders for all their spiritual instruction. They couldn't read the Bible.
Well, everybody didn't have a Bible when my dad was small.
Right, and if they did, it was in Latin.
There was only one for a family, and they were very proud of it.
Good.
Actually, that chain still exists today in a different fashion.
Yeah.
Because now people are allowed to read their Bible, but the church has introduced means to systematically destroy the credibility of the Bible, so you still have to go to the priest for correct information.
Gordon?
I think the Catholic Church at one time was, like back in the 1600s and that, they were against education of the public, so it kept them ignorant, and they couldn't read for themselves and kept the Bibles away from them.
Again, as you read in that article, they were against every policy initiated to give any kind of latitude or freedom to the people. And behind closed doors still are.
They didn't have any schools were religious schools when my parents were small.
Yeah. See?
I think this is where they're going to be forced to making the most of the Antichrist thing eventually, because now, with the internet and all kinds of sources of information, their ability to control access to education and knowledge is pretty limited. So the only tool they have left now is fear, and they are sowing the seeds of that fear in their, in the information in the propaganda they put out about the Antichrist, and we'll have to use that sort of as a last-ditch effort to regain control that they've lost.
Yes, Gordon?
Yeah, just on that, I've noticed Catholic Church is doing a lot of advertising on television, promoting themselves.
Yeah.
Stating that they originated with Jesus and he was the first pope, and the standard line, like they brought the Bible and so forth, like pretty powerful stuff.
They're like custodians of the legacy.
Yeah,
The keys.
Yeah. Really, the way they interpret.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the degree to which they can get that message across to the people in general will dictate the amount of influence that they can obtain. Okay, paragraph 13 then, the ultimatum. That was this ultimatum issued by the Duke of Brunswick to the citizens of France to comply or be punished. It backfires. And it, in effect, has the opposite action to what they had wanted to obtain. It stirred up the nation to a frenzy of resistance. So, rather than thinking that they could, come in and threaten and get the people to comply, instead it stirred the people up to resistance, more resistance than they had even had before.
12.
Did I read 12? Yeah, I think so. That was the ultimatum. That was the ultimatum. Most of that paragraph was about the words of the Duke of Brunswick. Yeah. So that was the great voice. If, I guess if we ever want to pinpoint a single event that was the great voice, fulfillment of the great voice, that would have been it. That the issuing of that ultimatum to the people of France. It had a huge impact. So this great voice roused the spirit of the whole nation, and more than anything else, hastened the fall of the throne and opposed the success of the coalition. The coalition there being the European coalition that had put forth this ultimatum. There was but one wish, one cry of resistance from one end of France to the other. The popular party, which was thus forced, as it were, to triumph, saw no other means than that of annulling the monarchy, and in order to annul it, to depose the king. His dethronement was discussed in the clubs, which the Jacobins would have been probably the forefront. 47 sections of Paris declared that if the resolution of dethronement were not pronounced by the Assembly that very day, the tocsin would be sounded at midnight, the drums should beat the general, and the palace should be attacked on the 10th of August. So the great voice of Leopold II, or his spokesperson, the Duke of Brunswick, issuing the ultimatum to the revolutionaries of France, resulted in a backlash throughout France of fury and resistance to the external threat, and caused the consolidation of otherwise fragmented and unorganized factions. It also resulted in an organized backlash against the king for seeking outside assistance. So it consolidated what would have been fragmented factions in the government of France, and consolidated them against one common what they consider one common enemy, and that was the powers from the coalition powers from the outside. Gordon?
Just wondered what that word toxin. I've never seen that word before.
Bell.
Poison.
Bell.
Like a bell or something, I think.
What's that?
Toxin
It's not spelled the
should
same.
sound.
It's poison. It's a TOC.
Oh.
I don't know whether it was the church bell or the tongue.
What? The drums? Didn't it say drums somewhere?
And the drum.
The drums. Yeah.
In other words, it was some kind of an alert saying, you
Well,
know,
when there was a fire, they'd have it. That's what made me wonder if it was something to do with the city.
an alert anyway.
Yeah, I maybe went to the wrong thing here. Should have gone to the dictionary. Would have been a better place to go on here.
Was the general with the drums beat the war drums?
Can the natives that you're over there?
I don't know.
The natives are beating on right now.
Right.
Yeah, it's a sound of an alarm, usually a bell, or a bell used to sound an alarm. So whether you take a verb or a noun.
I got fired.
Yeah, a warning bell.
Probably used the church bells.
Probably. Yeah. Most likely. Yeah. I don't know if this would have. No. General is the French word. That's not sure about
That's
Be the public, wouldn't it? Or
I think
Yeah.
so, the general public.
kind of reminds me of the old telephone system we used to have when they put a long ring through
Yeah.
everybody. You know, it was the
It's a call
general
to action anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it would be a call to action of the various factions around that would be interested parties. And let's take a look at this 10th of August on the timeline here. That would be up here. So the petition from 47 out of 48 parish sections demands deposing the king, and the revolutionary commune usurps the municipal government of Paris. I think we remember reading about the Paris commune, and we'll be reading about it here again in paragraphs. The Paris commune was during the French Revolution. It was the government of Paris from 1789 until 1795. Not the government of France, but the government of Paris. And especially from 1792 until 1795. Established in the Hôtel de Ville just after the storming of the Bastille, the commune became insurrectionary, essentially refusing to take orders from the central French government in the summer of 1792. The first mayor was Jean-Sylvain Bailly. He was succeeded in November 1791 by Pétion de Villeneuve after Bailly's unpopular use of the National Guard to disperse a riotous assembly in the Champ de Mars, July 17, 1791. On the 9th of August the 9th, 1792, and that was just what we just looked at here a minute ago, a new revolutionary commune took possession of the Hôtel de Ville. The next day, insurgents assailed the Tuileries, where the royal family resided. During the ensuing constitutional crisis, the collapsing Legislative Assembly of France was heavily dependent on the commune for the effective power that allowed it to continue to function as a legislature. So the Legislative Assembly, which was really the government of France, depended on the commune for its power. It's a kind of unique sort of thing. Between August the 10th, 1792, which is the date that in fact that we're considering it right now, and the meeting of the convention on September the 20th, just a little over a month later, revolutionary furor grew. Power shifted from the Legislative Assembly, now a lame duck, to the Paris Commune. The Commune was a city assembly made up of representatives elected from 48 neighborhood districts called sections. Because nearly universal male suffrage had taken effect on August the 10th, the sections and the Commune became increasingly dominated by the sans-culottes, a group composed mostly of artisans and shopkeepers fiercely devoted to the revolution and direct democracy. So it was basically was saying it was dominated by the lower class of people who wore long pants rather than the short culottes that the nobility wore. So that is up here, August the 9th. August the 10th was the fall of the monarchy. The popular assault on the Tuileries and Louis XVI deposed. And August the 11th, the Legislative Assembly elected an executive council of 6 ministers to oversee the national election of representatives to the convention. So on. So you can just see, you can just follow the timeline down. August the 13th, the royal family is imprisoned. The 14th, you have the distribution of communal land, except for forest land. So there's a little bit more of an effect there on the old feudal system. And the 15th, in the west of France, John Cottereau, known as Jean Chouan, declares for the king and resists the call for volunteers. And then you have the revolt of the Chouans, to be connected to a larger revolt in the west, which was the Vendée. All those who were loyal to the monarchy, and they revolted in the west against the republic. That was just August the 15th, so 5 days later, And August 19th, the defection of Lafayette. He deserted the army and fled to Austria. And then on September 2nd, the massacres set in and continued through to the 7th of September. And then the government of France changed and became the National Convention. So really very, very active couple of months there that changed the course of world history. And that's what they mean by the tocsin sounding, the drums and beats. It was
What do you mean by male suffrages? I've never heard of that. I've heard of the female suffrage.
Vote.
The vote?
It's just the men all the men were able to vote.
Yeah.
Not
How
just
did they work?
the privileged ones.
Maybe.
I think it was went from 1,700 votes to 1,500,000 or something like that.
Became inclusive.
Yeah.
That was the same thing.
There's that representation by population rather than
Right.
those wards.
Ripped by cop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like,
Which is another major earth-shaking event that changed the course of world history, because most governments are run that way. Most countries are run that way. Of course.
You can kind of see that once this process started, like there was pressure built up. It was like a dam. Once it started to leak, it just started to fall away by chunks because it was all connected together, and it just washed the whole thing away.
Exactly.
There's some sleepless nights in early August, I'm sure.
Yeah. That was such a major, active month. You're just ricocheting from one crisis to another.
You notice that they want change, like say Egypt, for example, or Syria, or anywhere. But there's no, when they get their head people out of there who were probably very corrupt, there's nothing to fill that vacuum, and there's chaos.
That's right. Unless you have something better to fill the vacuum with, you're going to have something worse.
And then when they don't dare do that plan ahead of time, because they would recognize that it was coming and they would oppose it.
And that's Syria right now too.
And
Saddam Hussein was another one. He was corrupt and he was violent,
corrupt.
but he kept the country in control.
It wasn't the right way, but
it was the only way they understood. That's it.
You can really see the possibility that given time that this sort of thing could happen in all of Europe. It's, the people are dissatisfied. The European community is trying to centralize control and government in Brussels, and people are like, just a minute here, we want our democracy back.
Yeah. You're going to see it happening where countries are severely affected by financial woes, for example, in Greece and Italy and so on. They're they're reacting to government control. Governments are trying to get things back on track, but that involves unpopular taxation, unpopular decisions. People revolt against that. They may be effective in ousting the government, then usually they're left with something worse that they should get.
Isn't that what you see in the States right now?
Yeah.
It's money, really.
Yeah.
The problem is money.
Whenever it affects the pocketbook, major shifts happen. Always for the better. Yeah. Anyway, I guess our time is gone. We had kind of a late start for today. But
Where do we get?
we ended at the end of this paragraph 13, so there's still a fair bit to go on this. Now, I may be away next week, so I'll maybe leave that with Dave or whoever wants to do this. I think everything's prepared to the end of the section. So there's lots to, and I've got the links there. You can go on, on